Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our two experts. Welcome to all of our audience. I'm Johanna Stadelbauer of the Postdoc office, and I warmly welcome you to the third and last talk in our second season of the alumni.post.talks, which is our interview series where we connect the postdocs we have in Graz to researchers who have degrees from the University of Graz and are now doing great things internationally. And especially a welcome to Lisa Kienzl, who is our international alumna for today and is a religious studies scholar, and to cultural historian Peter Pichler, who is our postdoc from Graz. And they will be having a chat about maybe about what esports demons and metal fans have in common, or much different things. And now, Tina, do you want to say some words of welcome?
Yeah, before I start, hi and welcome. I'm Tina from the Alumni Office. Thank you very much, Lisa, for being our guest today, and also to Peter for interviewing. Thank you so much. Yeah, before we start, I would like to mention our international alumni network. Also, we have international alumni groups. We call them chapters, and there are also 5 in Germany. Lisa, the one next to you is in Hamburg. And these groups are organized by volunteers, former students of our university, who regularly organize events or act as a contact person. So yeah, that's the thing I want to mention. And yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Tina. And now, very soon I will give over to our interviewee couple. But before, I would like to introduce Lisa, live from Bremen. She is a postdoc in the area of literatures and media of religions at the University of Bremen, and is working on a habilitation project on gaming communities and esports, which also touches on her long-term research interests of gender and fandom. Lisa Kienzl holds a PhD in religious studies from the University of Graz and specialized in masculinity constructions and transformation of religious elements in the TV show Supernatural. That's why the topic of this talk today mentions the Winchester brothers, whom I don't personally know, but would very much welcome to find out more about them, but maybe I will today. Lisa Kienzl also holds a PhD in anthropology, so she and I studied together at some stage in our different degrees. And she had a focus on 19th century national identity and anti-Semitism in the Austrian Empire. Lisa is very well acquainted with demons and discourse analysis. And that brings us to our interviewer, Peter Pichler, researches heavy metal, a musical genre that can sometimes still be labeled as lawless, satanic, or rebellious. Peter Pichler was principal investigator of a FWF project, Austrian Science Fund project, on the topic of metal music studies at the Institute of the Foundations of Law at our university here in Graz, and that was completed in March 2023. Peter Pichler is a cultural historian and interested in the influence of social developments on heavy metal. For example, how migration, the equality of women, climate change, or the coronavirus pandemic relate to this field. And among Peter's other research areas are European Union, cultural history, and the narrative construction of history and related identities. And you might have guessed from seeing both of these researchers here, they also share maybe a passion for science communication. So that should be also very, very interesting science to public engagement activities. And we are very, very happy that you agreed to share your experience today. And I now become invisible, as does Tina, and I give over to the interviewer, Peter Pichler, for the first question. Have a good exchange.
Many thanks, Johanna, for that very nice introduction. I'm very happy to be here. I think that's a great chance to exchange on topics that we all share as postdocs, about careers and postdocs, and also about our research topics. So I just want to start and jump right into the topic. Dear Lisa, as we just heard in the introduction, you already have an extremely exciting academic path behind you. And I'm sure there is pretty much of that already still on the road ahead. So to speak, you went from anthropologist to a religious scholar who is working on e-gaming. So that's a pretty long road. First question, very simple question, that is a long question. How did that happen? Can you briefly outline your current research topics? Can you say, what are you doing in academia currently?
Yeah, so thank you, Johanna, for the introduction, and thank you, Peter, for this great question. I think, yeah, if you shorten it as you did in your question, it really sounds like a stretch coming from anthropology, going to religious studies and ending up with esports or gaming in general. And it kind of already happened during my studies. So I started studying ethnology, cultural anthropology in Graz, but was very interested in religious studies. But that was not a study that was available during the time I was studying. So all my extracurricular courses I went to do for at the Institute for Religious Studies. And then there was a study program established, and then I studied that too. And I was especially interested in this program because they had a huge focus on popular culture, on film especially. And I was able to focus and to discuss and analyze television series there. So that was my shift from anthropology, which I love to study, but going to religious studies because of this popular culture, film, television topic. And from there, I got the possibility to come to Bremen. And Bremen has, with the institute I'm with now, with Professor Kerstin Rade-Antweiler, she has a huge focus on gaming. So I was interested in that, and I wanted to continue in that way, and that's the way I came to Bremen. So really this focus on popular culture and religion in general. And yeah, that led me to gaming communities. And I think what I do now, so my current research topic is I do not play video games all the time, but I also do play video games. So I play with colleagues and also of course, for research. But my main focus is esports. So I hope everybody know what esports is. If not, we can go into that later. So esports is really a very fascinating topic that not that many researchers are focusing on. It becomes more and more. There are really great publications during the last years, but I think what is really interesting is the social, political, and context of this emerging field, and also the political notion that comes with that. So that politicians are more and more interested. If you think, for example, political parties now have online in video games meeting points where they meet potential voters. And if you know Twitch and streaming and stuff like that, that was, especially in the US during the last campaigns, a huge topic. So what I'm especially interested in is the notion of the nation and how that comes to play within gaming communities, especially in esports, because you have teams, you have national teams, not only, but there are also national competitions, tournaments, you have international teams that compete against each other, and there is this idea of regions and the notion of the nation that really comes into play within this structure. So kind of different interests and groups that are visible there. And of course, fandom is a huge topic. And that also comes from my interest from popular culture, from film and television. And that kind of continues here too. So just to outline a little bit what I'm interested in.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Perfect description of a fascinating way. So I've written down 3 points here. 2 will come later. That is fandom. but there is one point that really struck me that you mentioned now, and that really confirms one thing that I have also in the experience on my path in academia so far. You told us that you came from anthropology, you were fascinated by anthropology, but basically what you learned there and the topics you deal there with the issues, you also found them in religious studies. And something like popular culture seems to be the missing link. So the question that I'd like to ask you, and this is also basically one basic point that we are talking here about today at all, is that today science is not so much about disciplines like classic disciplines like religious studies or history or legal studies. It is about topics, it is about themes, and that makes it possible to do something like you did, like wander from one field to the next, and there's the missing link. So my question would be, what is your take on this? Is it possible just like do we have to think today of science something like it's not more disciplines, but more like looking at certain issues, topics, problems from different points of views? What is your take on this?
I was, as I think you heard in the introduction, also what I talked about now, always very interdisciplinary in my approach. Doesn't matter what I did research on, but interdisciplinary, an interdisciplinary focus was really important for me always, because I really like to engage with different perspectives, maybe to call it like that, because there are, of course, different perspectives. So I'm coming from anthropology, I use different methods, or I understand something, or I understand a method differently than someone coming from, I don't know, communication studies, or someone coming from law, etc. But I think it is really, or at least in my opinion, it is really important, as you said, like to understand research more in the terms of topics and not in that it is structured so much in the way it was in disciplines. But I want to say this, I think it's ambivalent, because when you think of career, then again you have professorships, and they are very much connected to disciplines, and they are very much like in German, die Breite des Faches, like the whole range of the discipline. Yeah, and especially in the German-speaking area, you have the Habilitation. So and then again, I think until the professorship, you're really open, or you have more possibilities to stretch your wings and do research interdisciplinary. But when it comes to applying for professorships, it can become an issue, or at least you have to be aware that there are specific topics or themes that you have to address if you want to become a professor in a specific discipline. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because, for example, if we are talking of e-games, you can look at e-games from the point of view of legal studies. Those are transnational legal process. You can look at it as identity processes. You can look at their like nationalism studies, like the construction of the nation there. So I think more and more science is happening in a way that this is a matter of looking at certain objects in the world or subjects in the world from different angles. But it is not easy. So in the practice of science, still we have that professorships are for history. They are not for a topic, but they are for history. So there is both. It is ambivalent also from my point of view. And so short follow-up question. What would that mean like for a further career path? So would you recommend us there? Should we not focus on topics, but be more conservative? Or what does that mean in practical terms?
I would argue in terms of a career in academia, since that is, I think, a big topic before PhD, but especially after you get your PhD and you start your postdoc career. I did what I liked and what I love about research, doing really interesting topics, focusing on things I was personally interested in, and not that much what could be strategically good to do research. And that kind of worked really well for me, because then at some point, I don't know, I did a research project that was not funded, but got funding 2 years later. Or I went to a conference doing a talk about something I was really interested in, and then got a job after that because somebody heard me talk and we met there and got a connection, and stuff like that happened. And of course, these are also often very interdisciplinary jobs. And I'm not 100% sure if that kind of path will work going to a professorship. We will see. But I think it is important, since academia is not really a certain career path. So you cannot plan it. You don't have, like in other fields of society, you are 40 and you have, of course, a permanent contract, because you don't. Or you maybe, if you got a professorship or stuff like that, or got one of the very few assistant associated jobs, or a lecturer or stuff like that. But I think what is important, if you don't have this certainty career-wise, then it is, at least in my opinion, it is important to do something you like and you are interested in. Because, yeah, I want to spend my day with something I'm interested in and do something I like.
I only can stress to a certain degree what you are saying, but maybe then one could put it into a nutshell like this. So we should go for exciting topics, but we should look at the exciting topics from the point of view of our disciplines. Would that be something like a bottom line there?
Yeah,
be aware
probably.
of the borders of the discipline still, because in reality we won't be able to leave them for a better, so to speak. So
if you are, I think, striving for a career in academia, you always have to think about where could I land, or what could my goal be. And if your goal is a professorship in a specific discipline, you have to know what you have to do to get that. And I think this connection kind of works for my approach to what you said, like this using methods and theories coming out of a discipline, and maybe but maybe looking at niche topics or topics that are not that common within the discipline. So I'm not looking at everyday life. I am in some way, but in another way than many people are doing in anthropology, or also at people do in religious studies.
Actually, that already brings me to the next question that I've written down. So both of us, we are working on something that could be called niche topics, or that still, at least at the moment, is still a niche topic. So actually, my personal experience, also harking back to what we already discussed about this looking for exciting topics, and also having the ambition of tearing down walls between disciplines. So far for me, that was a positive experience. When I was researching heavy metal, it was easier to acquire third-party funds than with a topic like the European Union. So basically, so far, my experience is that there's a certain attractiveness, a certain sexiness about topics that are not that usual. So my question would be, what is your experience with topics like that could be called niche topics? Would you recommend to work on them or leave them behind? What is your take on this?
I think also it depends a little bit. It's a very, very academic answer to anything. But no, I think, as I said before, I think it is important in career, on a career path that is not that certain where it will lead, that you do something that is important for you. That can be something that is really popular at the moment, and that can be something that is more of a niche topic. I think what is important in that term is to find like-minded researchers, maybe within the same discipline. So I found great connection to popular culture researchers in anthropology, but I did not have them like when I was studying. I did not meet them then, but I met them later, so that was great. So find the connection and connect with like-minded researchers within the discipline or beyond that. So don't, or at least that was my experience, don't stay within your discipline, because you might find so many interesting perspectives and also interesting researchers outside of that. So go to maybe a, I don't know, communication studies conference or something like that. So maybe a field where you are kind of touching could be interesting, or literature studies. So I'm just thinking about disciplines that are interesting, and the conference I have been to, and they were really enriching, because I was kind of this not really alien, but doing something different, but still touching on the same topic. And there were really great conversations we had there, because of this different perspectives coming from different disciplines. And I think especially interdisciplinary workshops or retreats or whatever are really a great way to get this connection and to find people that are doing similar things than you are.
So if I got you right, would you stress also then that it is important to look at the open questions in your field? So it's not leaving the trodden path behind or something like this, but finding allies that go with you. Is that the key, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely.
Build your team around you or something like this?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is so important to have your team, or whoever that might be. That can be like mentors you meet, or that can be like people that are on the same career level as you are, on the same at the same university you are, or on different places all over the world. But to meet these people, I think that is this networking aspect. Like, I think everybody tells you from the beginning of your PhD that you have to network. And at the beginning I was like, how do I do that? Like, what will it like be, and what will it bring me in some way of positive stuff? Of course, I like to talk to people, but then during the years I kind of realized that doing this kind of going to conferences, meeting people, getting to know researchers from different fields, from an interdisciplinary perspective, then you get the possibility maybe for a third-party funding, because you often need people from different disciplines to apply for one fund. So that is an important part. Or maybe they got an interdisciplinary network they are establishing, and they just need an anthropologist. Great, I know one in Austria or in Germany or wherever. So I think that is the really important part, and getting these people together around you in some way, not physically. That's most of the time not possible in academia.
That is very much in line with what is my experience. That is one always has to be open in two ways: open for new questions, open for the open questions, but also be open for new perspectives. Just read books about topics that you've never worked on. Go to web shops, go to workshops, the topics that you are not working on. I think that's the point here. So that really, I think that's the key point here. So what's another question that I'd still like to ask you? You mentioned the keyword certainty of career path in academia. What is that? Is it possible? And if you look at your own way, can it work? Can it not work? Do you have any recommendations for us?
I'm not sure if I have recommendations, but I can tell you what.
Maybe what is your personal take on this?
So
live academia, so to speak.
I think there are a lot of problematic aspects. So as you know, I'm working in Germany right now. So there is this really fantastic thing called Wissenschaftszeitvertragsgesetz. Like, it's the most German word ever. And I think also in Austria, the new university law goes in the same direction of regulating time you can spend within different path or phases of your career. And so it's kind of a time management thing of a career to some extent, but it's in a really bad way, I would say. because this reduction of time you have for your research, it kind of, so I'm coming from like cultural studies from humanities, so you need time to think, to do your research. So that is one of the most important thing, to even find these open questions, or to go into the field and just see what is there, what are there. For example, if you're looking at fandom, so you have to talk to people first to know what issues can be, if there are power irregularities, if there are issues with gender, with other identity constructions. So you have to first talk to people, but nobody's paying for that. So I think this reduction of time, like from a very political policy point of view, that is really problematic. But my take on the certainty or uncertainty within a career path, I think you have to be realistic. So it's probably not going to end in a professorship. It could be, but maybe it's probably it's not. But I think you have, or at least that's my take, I want to do research. I really love doing research. I love to teach. That's something I really love in my everyday work at the university. And I even really do like university policy. So I'm in a lot of committees, and I kind of try to engage with the developments within universities and within academia as far as it is possible for me. And I think you have to be like open to other possibilities you could do with the research you're doing, or with the abilities you gain during a PhD and during a postdoc phase. There's not only academia, there's whole other stuff in society where you can maybe get a permanent job, especially I'm not sure if that was part of the question. As a woman, children, there is a topic, age, family, friends, but that is probably for all people in academia. Like, how much time do you spend for your work? Like when it is when it is such an interesting field and you want to engage. I think a lot of people in academia are really engaging and doing so much research and spending so much time for their job, and that's great if it's good for you. But you have to find this balance, not only a work-life balance, but also a balance within the system that is kind of pushing you towards, of course you can work 60 hours, 70 hours, no problem. So I think being realistic and also finding a way to stay healthy within a system that is really work oriented.
Thank you very much for that answer. Just 2 points from my side. I think what you said is really important. It is important to stay realistic. It could end in a professorship, but it doesn't have to. So there's that certain ambivalence. And the second point, which I think is really important, you have to be aware of how much certainty you do need. So always maybe think of something like a plan B. You put it so greatly. There's so much other things than academia out there in the world. Be passionate about your work. Be passionate about research, but be realistic and also think about yourself in those terms. If you look at yourself, that would my advice be, how is your vulnerability there for certainty? How much certainty does one need? And that one has to be brought in a balance. That would be my take on this. So what you said is fully right. So I would stress that also. So thanks for that. So is there anything further, something like a practical advice that you could give us here, dear? How to survive academia in those terms?
No, maybe, as you said, like this being realistic and keeping in mind that it's not only you, like you are not so responsible for getting a job or getting this professorship, because you are not, your engagement or your passion, that is one part. Of course, that is a good and important part, but there are so many other things, like at least I think 1/3 or half of how I did get my jobs, I think I would say it is luck. Like I met the right person at the right time, or I knew somebody who did call me and ask, hey, did you see this this job? Do you want to apply? Stuff like that. So I think, yeah, don't take all the responsibility for succeeding within a field that is very competitive and very restricting, in a way of a pyramid at the end. So there are only very few professorships, and yeah, and that's okay. Like there is other stuff.
I think that's okay. That's a great bottom line. It is there, but also we were just talking about passion. What is linked to passion is fandom. So another question that I would like to ask you, both the fields that we are working in, they have their very own, very peculiar fan cultures, so to speak. So when I was reading your CV, I was asking myself, do you personally have yourself a fan soul, so to speak? So on the one hand, there's maybe, I don't know, the fan Lisa. On the other hand, there's the researcher Lisa. And perhaps there's a conflict between those roles. So I'm very interested in your research. How do you keep the distance to the subject, so to speak? Can you explain us a little bit how you deal with the topic of distance and proximity to your subject matter in your research? Is there a conflict between the research and the fan, or is it good when you're both? What is the point there?
I think this is a really excellent question. So, of course, I am a fan. I'm a fan of everything. I do research. I think partly because I find these topics really interesting, but also partly because, of course, I did play video games growing up. So, especially the ones I'm researching now, because I kind of know the field. I kind of got into that because I knew the field. And that was also my door into doing research. But then, as you said, you have this at some point even ethical question of how do I position myself within this field. And I would say, as I'm coming from anthropology, like doing field work, I talk openly with people doing my research and talk, okay, I am kind of a fangirl to some extent, but of course, I'm here now as a researcher. So I understand you with this part of my identity, but I also have another part of me, and that is the researcher part. And the methods and theories of my disciplines coming from, they really help me to get this distance and this perspective. And I think to some extent, it's really helpful to be passionate about your research topic, because I did my PhD on the television series. And if you have to watch a sequence of an episode, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 times, of course, with scientific methods, so with a film analysis, so you're distracting, you're breaking it up into pieces, into layers, but still you have to kind of like what you do, because otherwise you are going to go crazy.
Yes.
So, from my perspective, maybe you can, or maybe there are people out there that can do research on topics they are not interested in, but I think that really helped me also to get through my PhDs, like being really interested in. And then I was really glad after 3 or 4 years that there is a cut, because then I needed some distance, even though I did like a lot of it.
Yeah, just a follow-up. Thank you, Lisa, for the answer. Just a follow-up from my side on this. I think actually it's very helpful to be also a fan, because it is a door into the field and because it gives you so much knowledge about the field. So I started researching heavy metal because I realized like 10 years ago, there's something like a worldwide network of scholars that simply write and research heavy metal. but because I grew up with that music, I know that album was released then, that concert was there. So basically, as a fan, you have a lot of empirical knowledge. And the key point, what you mentioned there, what is so important and which kind of makes the conflict not existing, one simply has to be explicit about their role as a researcher. Just so, actually, my experience is it is very helpful to be a fan, but you have to know when you are a researcher and when you are a fan. You have to something like to describe your point in the field, describe why you are there, why am I at a heavy metal concert, am I there as a fan, or am I there like to watching it as an ethnographic, as a historiographical event. So it is important like to simply reflect on your point in the field. So I only can stress what you said. So would you also say so that fandom is good?
Of course. Definitely.
Right. That's a great bottom line. But I think what really is the point here, that actually there is not that great of a conflict between the roles. It's a matter of negotiation and like making explicit the terms of the discourse. I think that is the point here.
And as you said, especially if you are researching, I don't know, I would not call it subculture. I also kind of coming from this metal aspect of culture, but also in gaming, you have a very tight culture or different cultures. And even to get into this kind of group or get to that people acknowledge you as somebody they want to talk to, it is very helpful to say, yeah, but I know this band or I know this game. And of course, I'm not just this researcher that is going to this concert or going to this tournament and just ask some random questions. I thought something like back at home because I'm also a fan. I think that is really helpful. Yes.
I think the bottom line there is you need to know the etiquette of that field that you are researching. That gives you, one could also here reflect on gatekeeping there, but I think that's the key there, what you mentioned. So one more question would be, we've already mentioned it, you know both, you know German academia and you know Austrian academia. As far as I know, you did your PhDs here in Graz, but then you switched to Germany. So you know both systems, so to speak, very well. If you look at this and compare it a bit, so what are the differences there? Are there big differences from your point of view?
Yeah,
or is it similar?
I think it depends on the university. So like what university you are at. I think maybe also, of course, there are university policies that are different within specific countries. But I think especially with this example of the University of Graz and the University of Bremen, the difference is that the University of Graz is a really established old university, and Bremen is a new reform university. So they have different approaches in policy, in the structure of everyday academia. So I think there are pros and cons on both sides. So more structure often means more hierarchies, and that things may take longer because there are established processes you need to go through to get something. But on the other hand, you at least have established processes, because if there is less structure, it is, of course, very dynamic, it is very flexible, and you can maybe apply for something or do really great spontaneous projects. But on the other hand, there are still power relations there. So, of course, both university systems just contain people. Like, people are everywhere. I would not say the same, but there are tendencies or are that dynamics that are similar when some people come together and try to establish something. And I think there are values in both systems, and getting to know these was really great, at least for me in my career. So maybe if you have the luxury of choosing where to go, because I just went where there was a job opening, and I was lucky enough to get the job. But if you get the luxury or the possibility to choose, maybe that is something you want to look for, something that is different from a system, from the structure, because I learned a lot during the last years, that some of the things I definitely want to take to the next place I'm going to, whatever that be and where it will be.
Yeah. So thanks for the answer. I only can stress that too. So I did a part of my PhD thesis at the University of Mainz, and I also realized that there are certain differences in terms of academic culture, like rules are different. But what I really would like to stress here, if there is the opportunity to get to know both systems, one should really take that opportunity. So we don't have to answer the question whether Austria or Germany is better, so to speak, at this point. So I think we now have about like 10 to 15 minutes left. So I'd like to, before we get into the question from the audience, so I've written down one violent question, which I thought perhaps it could be quite tempting or exciting to do a little thought experiment. So the question is, when you think of the next 5 to 10 years, where do you see yourself then in scientific or professional terms? And how do you think academia would or should have changed then? So if you try to kind of imagine the next 5 to 10 years, what is going on there in your personal life and also in broader terms of science?
Yeah. So maybe from like the big to the smaller thing. So in a broad, I don't know, university policy development, I'm not sure. As I said before, like the Wissenschaftszeitvertragsgesetz, I really love this word. I kind of managed to remember it because there's so many components to it now. But I think there are tendencies I am very critical of, because especially combined with the cutting money from humanities departments, closing them down, also internationally, things I experienced during the last 10 years. I think there are problematic tendencies, especially for small disciplines or areas of research that are maybe more niche compared to, I don't know, medicine or something big that gets 500 million funded projects and stuff like that. But I really hope that these niches will continue, and there are some projects or policies, at least in Germany, that kind of try to strengthen these small disciplines. So I'm hopeful. And on a personal level, I really want to continue something I really do love. And I love teaching. I love doing research. If there is a possibility to continue that, great. If it's in academia, perfect. If it's somewhere else, let's go.
Great. I think that's a great bottom line there. Just what I want then to mention, when I am thinking about the future of university in Austria, you also have a great word there, Kettenvertragsgesetz, which is basically quite something similar. And if I would have something like a utopia or a wish for university policies there, I think there should be more public discourse on topic like this, because it's reflecting the life of scientists, it's reflecting the life of the families of scientists, and there need to be there should be more discourse on that. Let's put it that way. So from my point of view, my list of questions is quite finished. Johanna, may I give it over to you again?
Yes, thank you so much, Peter. I was really hoping you were going to ask all of your questions because I was burning for the answers. And thank you, Lisa, for sharing. Maybe now we will wait some silent moments to see if someone feels inspired to post something into the chat. Meanwhile, I will silently talk more. I really liked you talking about the politics as well, the politics that surround the work we do and we can do. And I really enjoyed, Lisa, that you are actively engaged in university politics as well, because if you're on a temporary contract, that's kind of a big commitment, but it's very rewarding because you really get to know the system. And talk. Does someone want to post a question in the chat? You may do so now, and in the meantime, I take the opportunity. I know that both of you do some science communication or some Wissenschaftskommunikation, because Peter, you have a blog alongside your FWF project, and Lisa, I know you were doing something for the Standard. For example, can you outline, both of you, how you got into that and why do you think it's important, and is it something you want to continue? Maybe Peter, can you start, since you have not been asked answering questions?
Yeah, many thanks. How I got there, I simply was passionate to write about it. And the other point is how to get there. What was important to me, like something always, academia is in a pressure to be purposeful. So I was always asking myself, what do the topics that I'm researching on, that was heavy metal culture and European Union cultural history at those points, what does that have to say about current pressing questions? So, for example, I was asking myself, how does a heavy metal scene in Graz deal with these problems of migration? Is it a topic there? Yes, it is a big topic. Or what about gender roles there? Or something like a very current topic is like climate change reflected in metal culture. Yes, it is. So always I was asking myself, and also asking myself critically, what does what I am researching say about questions that are pressing in society? And that was the nexus to something like to trigger interest in your research. And from that stemmed some podcasts and also news articles. So the key is, the missing link is to ask yourself, it would be to be idealistic, what does it bring society? But think about pressing current questions. That would be my take on it.
Super. So you started with your own passion and with your commitment to think about the impact of your research, maybe also.
Yes, something like this.
That's very cool. What about you, Lisa?
Yeah, I think I have to totally agree with you, Peter. So I came to write for the Standard. We had this blog for religious studies, and I was part of the institute at that time, and was able to write some blog posts, and also I think like this dynamic of getting the research out there so that people see what we are doing, especially if you are in a more of a niche topic doing your research, and also to get in contact with people, because I'm always amazed, like what or who contacted me afterwards and told me, oh, I read this article, for example, or I read this blog post, or I heard this podcast, and I'm really interested in, I don't know, maybe a question, or it's so the science to public aspect. I think it is really important, because we are doing research that should in some way be connected to society. So when people are interested in what we do, that is a really easy way to get it out there and to connect with interested people of the public.
And usually there's far more interest than one would expect, actually. So most of all, if one is working on a popular culture, that is popular. So don't be afraid to go out there. That would be my point of view.
And it's not a one-way street when you say, Lisa, so you don't just communicate into the world, but you are very, very interested in what comes back and engaging with the responses you get. Yeah. So I think I would like to continue this sort of conversation because I was just, I was on a study trip to to different European countries and outside recently, and the question of public engagement, for example, doing stand-up comedy about your research or something like that. There are really, really, really great examples for that, and I would be very cool to make something like this here. But in any case, you know, in having this back and forth with the people who your research is about or who your research can somehow impact in their everyday lives, I think that's very important. Yeah. So I think, looking at the time, I give over to the both of you with Tina and my thanks for taking the time. You now have 3 minutes for some final closing words. And thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think it is really important to talk not only about our research, but also about like what's going on like in everyday life, in academia, how people became what they are and how their path developed and stuff like that. So I think it's really great that you have this alumni post talks, and yeah, people have the possibility to even get in touch. And as I said, like in the beginning, I think it was not part of the recording, but people already contacted me just from the advertising of this talk series and said, hey, you're doing that research, interesting, let's connect. And I think that is also part of things, or part of why I really love doing stuff like that. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for your closing words. And it was a pleasure to be able to invite you. Peter.
Yeah, also thanks from my side to you, Lisa, for sharing your experiences. Thank you to you, Johanna and Tina, for inviting us. My final, I just can say we should keep this up because it's a great hub for exchanging on all what Lisa mentioned, experiences, research topics. So I'm very grateful that I could be here. Right here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now Tina can stop the recording and we say goodbye to our listeners and watchers.